Hi class, how are you today? We are from group 3. We are Salsabila, Indri, Gatra, Novia, Novita, Gita, and Linta. Today we will talk about problems in translation. Well, do you know that there are some problems in translation which deal with linguistic and cultural un- or translatability? Well, if not, today we will talk about that problems. Indonesian and English are linguistically and culturally distinct languages. They do not share a lot of linguistic and cultural features in common. However, lexically, both English and Indonesian use affixes. Their grammar is expressed through synthetic words, word order, and separate gemental units or stress, rhythm, and intonation. However, they are different in terms of lexicon, grammar, collocation, and culture. Well, without any further ado, let's just jump to the material. The first one, we will talk about lexical differences. A word, as a lexical unit of a language, carries many meanings. The lexical meaning of a word is not one-to-one. Let's look at the example. The word house. In Indonesia, it can be rumah or gedung tempat tinggal. But it can also be translated into dewan or the House of Representative. Meaning also varies across languages. Well, let's take a look at the example. The word rice. The meaning of the word rice can be padi or gabah or beras or nasi in Indonesian. Or the word hutan in Indonesian can be woods, forest, jungle, or wilderness in English. So, one word can have lots of meaning, or there are variation of meaning in other languages. So, translators must be aware of meaning variations across languages. In linguistics, we have known semantic fields, conceptual concepts, which reflect the divisions and subdivisions imposed by a given linguistic community on the continuum experience. For the example, the field of plants have subdivisions, flowers, shrubs, trees. So the plants are the hypernym or the superordinate, and flowers or shrubs or trees are the hypernyms or subordinate. Sometimes the semantic fields in one language are different from those in another language. For the example, let's take a look under this sentence. Hear and see have their own lexical meanings. Mendengarkan dan melihat. But they belong to the same semantic field. Perception. Words that have multiple meanings or polysemous words are often untranslatable. So in translating, translators must find equivalence by considering their semantic fields. After understanding lexical differences, now let's take a look on the grammatical differences, which will be explained by my friends.
Another problem in translation is the grammatical differences. In English, the grammar is marked by tense, number, aspect, and gender, while in Indonesian, we might not find such things. Let's talk about time. Time in English is grammatically marked, while time in Indonesian is lexically marked. What does it mean by lexically marked? Lexical means the word that can stand on its own or is independent. To make it clear, let's take a look at the example in the table. Indonesian with the lexical and English with the grammatical. For example, dia menari. In Indonesian, the sentence already has a meaning. But in English, it is hard to translate because the time indicator is unclear. Therefore, we need to add lexical to the sentence for the Indonesian. For example, for past, dia menari kemarin. Kemarin means something in the past, and it is the lexical. While in English, we can translate it into she danced, because the time indicator is more clear. And for the perfect, dia telah menari, in the English, she has danced. And for progressive, dia sedang menari, and in English, she is dancing. For the future, dia akan menari, and in English, she will dance. Another thing that we're going to discuss about is the plural words. In Indonesian, for plural words, we simply use reduplication. For example, orang-orang, meja-meja, bapak-bapak, etc. And other than reduplication, we also simply add determiner. For example, para, kaum, banyak, which indicate that the noun is more than one. While in English, for plural words, we can add morpheme. For example, chair become chairs with s. And then we can change the vowel, like men become men, or we can use transformation. For example, goose become geese. And for a note, English plural form may not always be translated into plural in Indonesian. For example, wild plants growing in the forest will be translated tanaman liar yang tumbuh di hutan, not tanaman-tanaman liar yang tumbuh di hutan-hutan. Next is the aspect. Indonesian and English are neither polysynthetic language, in which aspect is indicated in the word. What is aspect? Aspect is a grammatical category which involves using affixes and or changing the form of the verb to indicate the temporal distribution of an event. For example, whether an event is completed or whether it is momentary or continuous. In translating English sentences into Indonesian, it's really important to take aspects into account. We do really need to see the context. For example, in Indonesian, telah sometimes translated into have plus past participle. However, not all completed action can be translated into have plus past participle. And to make it clear, let's take a look at the example in the table. In English, time markers which indicate aspects are prepositions or adverbs. Let's take a look at the example in English. On Saturdays, he went to the cinema. Will be translated, setiap hari Sabtu, dia pergi ke bioskop. And then, when he had finished his work last night, he went to the cinema. usai merampungkan pekerjaannya tadi malam, dia pergi ke bioskop. And then the perfective aspect, he is eating, will be translated, dia sedang makan. And then he ate it up will be translated, dia telah makan habis Indominya. And then she shaved my beard, dia telah mencukur jenggotku. She shaved off my beard will be translated, dia telah mencukur licin jenggotku. The last is gender. In Indonesian and English, we do have suffixes, prefixes, and modifier to indicate gender. Let's take a look at the example. In English, for suffixes, we have, for example, cameraman or camerawoman, while in Indonesian, we have kamerawan or kamerawati. And then for the prefixes, in English, for example, male dancer, female dancer, and in Indonesian, for example, penari pria, penari wanita. And then we have boyfriend, girlfriend. And then in Indonesia, we don't have the exact thing to differentiate or to indicate the gender. We have one word, which is pacar. And then lady friend, gentleman friend means teman wanita atau teman laki-laki. And another is brother and sister. In Indonesian, saudara laki-laki atau saudara perempuan. And then about the zero and nis. In Indonesia, we have A and E differences. For example, God, goddess. In Indonesia, remember A and I, so dewa or dewi. And then steward, stewardess. In Indonesia, pramugara, pramugari. Heir, heiress. In Indonesian, ahli waris laki-laki, ahli waris perempuan. And then zero and in. In English, we have hero and heroine for the girl. And then pahlawan pria or pahlawan wanita in Indonesian. The other thing is or and rix. In English, for example, aviator, aviatrix, dominator, dominatrix. And for animals, there are variation. Lion, lioness in English, or buck rabbit, doe rabbit, peacock, peahen, jackass, jackass. While in Indonesian, we don't have that. We only say jantan or betina. For example, singa jantan, singa betina, and then kelinci jantan, kelinci betina.
And the next is collocation. What is collocation? A good way to think of collocation is to look at the word collocation. Co meaning together and location meaning place. Collocation is a group of two or more words that like to hang out together. Here are some examples of common collocation that you might know. For examples, make tea, I made a cup of tea for lunch. Do homework, I did all of my homework yesterday. Strong tea, powerful tea. Strong coffee, powerful coffee. Heavy rain, which rain. Rich taste, deep taste. Big mistake, deep mistake. Great fun, big fun. Sweet dream, nice dream. And then the types of English collocation. There are several different types of collocation made from combination of verb, noun, adjective, and etc. Some of the most common types are adverb and adjective. For example, Ben and Jane are happily married. You are fully aware that they are seriously problem. Adjective and noun. Jack was my big brother and I admire him. His dying was not any big surprise. And then the next, nouns and nouns. Let's give Mr. Jones a round of applause. And then the ceasefire agreement came into effect at 11 a.m. And then verb collocation. Verb plus noun. They are launched the production 1998. The price increase poses a problem for them. And then the next is verb and preposition. For example, as Bob went on the stage to receive his medal, you could see his sister swelling with pride. And then I was filled with horror when I read the newspaper report of the war. And then verb and adverb. For example, he pulled steadily on the rope and helped her to safety. And then she placed the beautiful child gently on the window ledge. And then nouns and preposition. For example, what's the reason for your unhappiness? And then nobody seems to have responsibility for the budget. And then adjective and preposition. For example, Heaton is famous for its cheese. And then I'm quite good at English, but I'm bad at maths and I'm terrible at physics. And then how to identify collocation. Be aware of collocation and try to recognize them when you see or hear them. And then treat collocation as single block of language. Think of them as individual block or chunks and learn strongly sport, not strongly plus sport. And then when you learn a new word, write down other words that collocate with it. And then read as much as possible. Reading is an excellent way to learn vocabulary and collocation in context naturally. And then revise what you learn regularly. Practice using new collocation in context as soon as possible after learning them. And then learn collocation in group that works for you. You could learn them by topic or by a particular word. And then you can find information on collocation in any good learner's dictionary. And you can also find specialized dictionary of collocation. And then the problem in translation collocation. The first is the engrossing effect of source text patterning. Translation sometimes might get quite engrossed in the source text and might produce the oddest collocation in the target language for no justifiable reason. For example, strong tea is literally dense tea in Japanese. Keep the dog is unacceptable in Danish because they usually hold the cat. And then misinterpreting the meaning of a source language collocation. A translator can easily misinterpret a collocation in the source text due to interference from his or her native language. And then the tension between accuracy and naturalness. A translation ideally aims at producing a collocation which is typical in the target language, while at the same time preserving the meaning associated with the source collocation. And then culture-specific collocation. Some collocation reflect the culture setting if the culture setting of the source and target languages are significantly different. Flexible patterns of language which allow several variations in form. Although the meaning of a word often depends on what other word is occur with. when we can still see that the word has individual meaning in given collocation.
Let's jump into cultural differences. In addition to lexical and grammatical differences, translation is problematic when it comes to cultural differences. Cultural differences refer to differences of worldview which are reflected in language. In cultural differences, we have idioms. Idioms are frozen patterns of language which allow little or no variation in form and often carry meanings which cannot be deducted from their individual components. There is an exception unless consistently making a joke or playing in word. A speaker or writer cannot normally do the following with an idiom. There are several things that you should pay attention with. The first, change the order on the word in it, delete a word from it, replace a word with another, change the grammatical structure, and the last, add a word from it. Next, there are several main problems in translating idioms and fixed expressions. Our ability to recognize and interpret an idiom correctly. To know more deeper about it, there are two cases of misinterpretation. The first one, some idioms are misleading. A translation who is not familiar with the idiom may easily accept the literal interpretation and miss the play on idiom. And then, idiom in SL may have a close counterpart in the TL or target language, which looks similar on the surface but has a totally or partially different meaning. Let's take a look with the difficulties in translating idioms. The first one, it doesn't have equivalence in the target language, and then it may have a similar counterpart in the target language, but its context of use may be different, and then it may be used in the source text in both its literal and idiomatic senses. And the last, using idioms is a matter of style. Okay, let's jump into types of idiom. The first one, we have lexemic idioms. In the lexemic idiom, we have a verbal, noun, adjective, and adverb. There are the example for verbal, get away, go on, and for noun, hot dog, and for adjective, salt and pepper, and for adverb, like a breeze. And then we jump into idiomatic pairs. For example, peace and quiet, safe and sound, on and off, up and down, read and weep, etc. And then there is phraseological idiom. For example, to kick the bucket, to be off one's rocker, and etc. And then proverbial idioms. For example, don't count your chicken before they're hatched. And another example, and then let's jump into the last one word idiom, such as lemon, yellow, chicken, loony, jerk, peach, hip, lousy, heartthrob, and etc. How to translate idiom? the form cannot be kept, but the target language word or phrase which has the equal meaning will be the correct one to use in the translation. Let's jump into the example 1, and in this slide you can see that is Indonesian idiom, literal translation, and then idiomatic translation. For example, bertepuk sebelah tangan is the Indonesian idiom, and then the literal translation is clap with one hand. But the idiomatic translation is one-sided love affair. And then you can see mendapat durian runtuh. In literal translation of that is getting a falling durian, but the meaning idiomatic translation is getting a fortune. Or the last example, mengais rezeki, have literal translation scoring for fortune, but it has a meaning making money or earning living. Okay, let's see for another example. For English idiom kick the bucket is not, the meaning is not menendang ember. Menendang ember is the literal Indonesia translation, but the real meaning is meninggal dunia, or the real meaning means idiomatic Indonesian translation. Or another example, pass the hat. Pass the hat is not pass the hat is not have the meaning ambilkan topi itu. That is the literal Indonesia translation, but the real meaning or the idiomatic Indonesia translation is mengumpulkan uang. Okay, for main language, translator must translate word in the source language into several words in order to make the meaning clearer. And then the same meaning component can appear in different surface forms of words. And then word can have several other meaning representatives, and a single meaning component can be expressed in various forms. Connotative. Connotative meanings usually differ one from another based on cultural background. For example, pig-headed, a name calling anjing to insult someone, chicken or yellow to refer to someone who is coward. It is important to not only to know the referential meaning of the word, but also knowing which words are considered positive or negative in their connotation. Referral meaning, for example, babu, that is maid, pelayan, that is waiter, pembantu, that is servant, and kacung, that is errand boy.
And now we are talking about the alternatives that we can use to translate lexical words. So we are dealing with lexical words that are difficult to be translated. So here, Bigman and Callow suggested to use 3 alternatives to translate lexical meaning. First, you can translate the lexical words by paraphrasing it. When you find some terms that don't exist on the target language, you can make a simple description about the terms. For example, we have rujak in Indonesia, but in English, they don't have that word. So we can translate it into a mixed fruit salad with spicy and sweet sauce or dressing. In my experience, some of my guests asked me to translate some Indonesian foods like rendang. Then I translated rendang into spicy meat cooked in spices and coconut milk. Then they also asked about gudeg, and I translated into sweet young jackfruit cooked for a long time. Yeah, it sounds weird, but it really helps. Okay, we move to the second one. The second one we have here, we can use loan words. Loan words are commonly used for people's name, areas, places, and so many others. For example, Nile River. In Indonesia, it becomes Sungai Nil. And then we have John in Bible. Indonesia, it becomes Yohanes. And in Japanese Bible, it becomes Yokanan. And here we have abd from Arabic word means servant. And in Indonesia, it becomes abdi with the same meaning. And the third, last but not least, we have a cultural substitution. Here we can translate the word of things or events that are not really the same between the source language and the target language by substitute by the culture. For example here, parrot fashion. In English, it means repeating or imitating the words without really knowing what the meaning of the words. In Indonesia, usually me, personally, I say mbeo when I see a little child starts to imitate or copy other people's word without knowing the meaning. And I will say,
ih, beo, kayak burung beo, ngikutin orang ngomong aja. It means that you just like parrot that repeating other people say.
Naturalness in translating. So when you are translating, it would be nice if it really fits to the target language meaning. But it requires a hard work and also a broad knowledge. You need to understand and you need to know really well about the meaning of the word, and you need to know about the terms that is suitable enough to describe the word. For example, in Japanese terms, we have dangir. So if you don't really know the word dangir, maybe it's difficult for you to translate it into natural, smooth translation. So dangir is an activity of pulling out weeds that disturbing the main plant to grow up, like the main plant like rice plant or wheat to grow up like that. And to make the translation becomes natural, it's really important because it will sounds nice to the target language. Now we talk about over translation and under translation. Over translation is translating the sentence of the source language longer than that it should be. It because the translator wants to put an extra meaning to make it real or make it natural without changing the quality of the translation meaning. On the other hand, the under translation translates the source language by reducing the meaning because the difference of language structure between the source language and the target language. As the result, it can be longer or shorter than the original text. But it will not affect the quality of the translation.
Hello, I am Brigitta, and now I want to explain the next material. The first is a change caused by translation. To express the meaning, a language has its own way in using linguistic devices. Passive sentence in Bahasa Indonesia may change into active sentence in English. The changes may not only cover textual language, but also cover semantic and cultural adjustment. For example, plural s, reduplication. When we want to say anak-anak in English, we say kids, not kid. And dia in English, we say he or she. The next is culture and translation. The relationship between language and cultures needs to be well understood by the translators. Translators must comprehend those differences of cultural viewpoint in order to get good understanding of the source text and can translate it to the people who have different set of beliefs, attitudes, values, and rules. For example, American address system. You have similar meaning as bapak, ibu, or saudara. Translators should develop cultural sensitivity in order to translate correctly. Understanding culture does make a difference in translation. The next is idiomatic translation. Idiomatic translation, or meaning-based, is the one that communicates the source language text meaning and a natural form of the source language. A truly idiomatic translation does not sound like a translation. It sounds like it was written originally in the receptor language. For example, she is a woman of steel. In bahasa, dia wanita yang berjiwa kuat. Idiomatic translation above is acceptable for the target readers because it sounds natural. The phrase a woman of steel is not simply translated into seorang wanita dari besi, but idiomatically translated into wanita berjiwa kuat because the translator understands the original meaning and knows both language well. Number 2 is meaning and shades of meaning. A translator must first analyze the text in the source language carefully to transfer the equivalent meaning into receptor language. The translator must not only maintain the meaning, but also the shades of meaning. For example, the word sad and grief in Indonesian have similar meaning, that is, sedih. But the word sad in Indonesian, the meaning is sedih, and grief in Indonesian, the meaning is kesedihan yang mendalam. And number 3, emotive meaning. A good translator will select forms that communicate the same meaning and emotive meaning. Whichever form is chosen, it should communicate both of the information and the emotion of the source language. For example, like, now what? Jadi bagaimana? I see. Saya paham kok. Yeah, right. Ya, terserahlah. How could you? Teganya dirimu padaku. Transferring the same emotional effect can be challenging for translators, since each culture has a different way of communicating. And then phonology. Phonological devices are used to indicate prominence in oral material. The translator should identify the prominence in the source language first, and then find the same devices in the receptor language which indicates unity and prominence. And then let's move to strategies in translating idioms. Number 1. Using an idiom of similar meaning and form. This strategy involves using an idiom in the target language which conveys roughly the same meaning as that of the source language idiom, and in addition consists of equivalent lexical items. For example, to find the needle in the haystack. In bahasa, mencari jarum di tumpukan jerami. Number 2. Using idiom of similar meaning but dissimilar form. For example, in English, like father, like son. And in bahasa, buah tidak jatuh jauh dari pohonnya. Number 3. Translation by paraphrase. Translation by paraphrase is done when a match cannot be found in the target language, or when it seems that inappropriate to use idiomatic language in the target text because of differences in the stylistic preference of the source and target language. For example, don't count your chicken before they are hatched. Number 4. Translation by omission. Translation by omission is done when the idiom has no match in the target language. Its meaning cannot be easily paraphrased or for stylistic reasons. Strategy of compensation. Strategy of compensation means that one may either omit or play down a feature such as idiomaticity at the point where it occurs in the source text and introduce it elsewhere in the target language. For example, English puns in Asterix comic. In bahasa, Lucanis Perbanicus, and etc. And that's all our presentation. Thank you for your participation and see you very soon. Thank you.